Today I'd like to chat with you about something that I refer to as cooking with economy and grace. Basically, doing the best with what we have. Hi sweet friends, I'm Mary and welcome to Mary's Nest, where I teach traditional cooking skills for making nutrient-dense foods like bone broth, ferment, sourdough, and more. So if you enjoy learning how to be a modern pioneer in the kitchen, consider subscribing to my channel and don't forget to click on the little notification bell below. That'll let you know every time I upload a new video. So as I mentioned, I want to chat with you about this concept that I refer to as cooking with economy and grace. A while back, maybe about a month or so ago, I posted something on the community page here on YouTube about chickens that I had found, whole chickens, raw chickens, that I had found while shopping, and they were priced at 94 cents a pound. During these times when sometimes it can feel like grocery prices are spiraling out of control, I was very happy to find those chickens for 94 cents a pound, and I shared that with you on the community page because they were sold at a big box store, specifically Walmart, which is a nationwide chain, and so I was hoping that maybe others would also be able to find that bargain. Well, interestingly enough, I received a number of comments from people who were very upset with me. They said to me, "Mary, you talk about making traditional nutrient-dense foods, and you're a fan of Sally Fallon's book, Nourishing Traditions, and you like her website where she has many articles that talk about all of these different types of nutrient-dense foods, and pasture-raised chickens, and the eggs from pasture-raised chickens, and grass-fed beef, and organic vegetables, and preparing food in the right way, and so on and so forth. How can you recommend buying commercially raised chickens for 94 cents a pound?" So some of the comments were very harsh, and I really wanted to take a little time to talk about all of that here today and what I mean when I say cooking with economy and grace. Yes, I definitely support traditional nutrient-dense food, and I support buying things organic, and I love chickens that are raised on pasture and the eggs from chickens that are raised on pasture, and I love wild-caught fish and grass-fed beef and organic fruits and vegetables and so on and so forth. But sometimes buying all of those items doesn't fit into everyone's budget. Now, I know some of you shared with me in the comments that you felt that no matter how tight your budget is, you should find the ability to buy the best food possible. And that would be nice if it were possible. But sometimes people's budgets are so tight, it's really the difference between buying a $25 pastured chicken and also being able to pay your electric bill or to put gasoline in your car to be able to get to work. So sometimes people need to make choices. And that's what I mean by cooking with economy. That yes, if you can afford the pastured chicken that may be $2.99 a pound, or as now I've noticed creeped up to $3.99 a pound and even $4.99 a pound, if you can afford that and you stretch that chicken as much as you can, you roast it and you enjoy it as a meal, and then you get every little bit of meat off of it and you use that to make another meal, and then maybe you have even more scraps left over to maybe toss with some spices, and you've often heard me say this before, and maybe make some tacos. You're sort of disguising maybe certain cuts of the chicken meat, maybe the dark thigh meat or something that people don't necessarily like, but kind of disguising it with some spices, maybe in a chicken chili or chicken tacos, something like that. But you really stretch that, and then you take that carcass and you make bone broth out of it. That's wonderful, and that's very economical. That's cooking with economy. But then you have to think about cooking with grace and showing grace to others. Cooking with economy goes hand in hand with cooking with grace. Sometimes if all we can afford is that chicken that's 94 cents a pound, and may, as the whole chicken, come in slightly under $5 if it's about a 5-pound chicken, and we do the same thing we would do with that maybe $25 chicken, that we roast it and that we enjoy it as a meal. We get every little last scrap of meat off of it, and then we use the carcass to make bone broth, so that we're being very economical and spreading and stretching that $5 chicken as much as we can. But that we're cooking with grace in the sense that we're not busting our budget. We're staying within our grocery budget and not putting ourselves under stress. We may love to be able to buy that $25 chicken. However, what can happen is if we try to do that and then we may not have enough money for some other essentials, we're going to be very stressed. And the whole reason that we're trying to transition from a processed foods kitchen, where we buy a lot of prepared foods, to a traditional foods kitchen, is to generally try to be healthier. And stress is not good for our health. It's not good for anything. And you often hear the expression, stress kills. So the last thing that you want to do is put yourself in a stressful situation. So by cooking with grace, and in essence being graceful, when we have that $5 chicken, and being also grateful that we have that $5 chicken, and also if you can afford the $25 chicken, but showing grace and being graceful toward the person who may only be able to afford the $5 chicken, we create a much better world. Being loving and kind to one another, especially during difficult times like what we're going through now, and showing that it's okay to cook with economy, it's okay to be exceptionally economical when maybe you have a very limited budget, and then being graceful, showing grace to others who may also have those very tight budgets, and also showing grace and being graceful to those who may have much tighter budgets than what you may have, is such a good thing to do, and also encouraging and helping one another rather than being critical. Saying to one another, that's okay that you bought the $5 chicken, because serving that whole chicken, and this is in my humble opinion, but serving that whole chicken that you have roasted, whether that chicken is a $5 chicken or a $25 chicken, serving that chicken and cooking it with love and serving it with love to even just yourself. I was single for a very long time and I ate many a dinner alone. But even if you're just serving it to yourself, or if you're serving it to friends or to your family, and you're serving it with love, that to me, regardless of how that chicken was raised, is better than any fast food that you can eat, and better than any prepared food that you might buy in a package from the grocery store or in a box from the grocery store. So cook with economy, but also cook with grace. And not just about showing grace to others, but showing grace to yourself. Be graceful, in essence, with yourself. You may really want to buy that pastured chicken, and you may feel sad and disappointed that you're buying the less expensive chicken, the chicken that may be considered by the traditional foods community not raised as well as the pastured chicken. But go easy on yourself and know that over time, things will get better in terms of grocery prices, but also things will get better with your grocery budget as you get farther along on your traditional foods journey. The more you learn to cook, and to cook real food, real whole food, the more you're going to find that you have actually more money in your grocery budget, because you're not spending all the money on the packaged and pre-prepared foods that can become very expensive. I have many videos where I've showed you how to make so many things homemade, and making these things homemade really lowers the amount of money that you then have to spend at the grocery store. It's amazing how many things that you can make from just a gallon of milk. And it's amazing how you can make your own homemade spices, your own homemade flavorings, your own homemade salad dressings, cream cheese, cottage cheese, ricotta. All types of things like this can be made homemade, and they can be made for considerably less than what you would pay for them. Even those things that you may think you're getting a good buy on, you can make mustard, homemade mustard, and you can ferment it, which makes it more nutritious, literally for pennies. You can make homemade ketchup, and you can ferment it. So not only are you making something homemade and making it for less than what you could buy it for at the grocery store, you're also making it more nutritious. You can also make homemade mayonnaise, which can help wean you off of the store-bought mayonnaise, which is often loaded with soybean oil. And that's an oil we really want to avoid in a traditional foods kitchen, because it's a very highly processed oil. And highly processed oils are damaged fats. And damaged fats can cause a lot of inflammation in our body. And inflammation only opens the door to disease. So over time, you're going to find that you're spending less and less and less on all of these pre-prepared and all of these processed foods and all of these packaged foods. And you're just buying the simple ingredients to make these things homemade. So now you're going to have more money in your grocery budget that at some point will allow you to pay more per pound for your chicken, and to be able to buy a chicken that's been raised on pasture, and to buy eggs from a chicken that has been raised on pasture. And you're going to again cook with economy. Even with the more expensive chicken, you're still going to find that it can be a good value for you once you have adjusted your grocery budget and you find that you can afford that more expensive chicken. You're still going to make that stretch many meals for you. You're going to roast it, as I mentioned. You're going to have the leftovers, and then you're going to have the carcass and maybe a few little scraps, little bits and bobs, and you're going to be able to make your bone broth. And then maybe if you've saved a few of those less desirable scraps, but you can use those and disguise them even in a chicken soup or something like that. And then you've really stretched that $25 or $20 or $25 chicken to the point where you've at least gotten maybe 3 meals out of it. So something I want to share with you also is that I really like to meet people where they are. Not everyone has a full-blown traditional foods kitchen. And that's why I don't come to you and say, well, okay, are you making bone broth? Are you culturing your dairy? Are you making all your ferments? You got that sourdough starter going? Are you making your sourdough bread? And so on and so forth. I feel that if I did that, people would run. And also something that I learned from teaching this right in my own kitchen here over the years is that if you try to make people have a full-blown traditional foods kitchen right away, they become very overwhelmed and can easily throw their hands up and go right back to buying more processed foods, more prepared foods, packaged foods, whatever you want to call them, going through the drive-through more, at fast food restaurants. I use the term restaurant loosely. But whatever the case may be, people just get overwhelmed. So that's why when it comes to bread, I start with showing you how to make a very simple bread. A bread that's a sandwich bread, similar to what you would buy in the sleeve at the grocery store. And it's made with yeast, and that's okay. And that loaf of bread is probably going to cost you about 50 cents to make. So it's going to be less than what you would pay for that loaf of bread at the grocery store. And it's going to be homemade. And it's going to have less ingredients than all the various dough conditioners and whatnot that are in those breads that are sold at the grocery store. So know that I really like to meet everybody where they are on the continuum, so to speak, of their journey from leaving a processed foods kitchen behind and venturing to a traditional foods kitchen. And not only that, I like to speak to everyone regardless of what your food budget is. I really want everyone to feel included here. I want everyone to feel welcome here. I'm never going to preach to you that everything you need to start buying right away has to be pastured or grass-fed or wild-caught or organic. I'm never going to do that because I always want everyone to feel, as I said, welcome here, and to feel that they can be on this journey with us no matter where they are on their journey, on the continuum to a traditional foods to a traditional foods kitchen. And I guess to a certain extent it could be a traditional foods condition. But that's what's important to me, that we're all here together, that we're all supporting one another, that we're learning how to cook with economy, that we're showing grace towards one another, including showing grace to ourselves, being graceful with one another. Sometimes our world has become very harsh at times, and people, maybe it has something to do with the fact that a lot of things are easy to say online and not face-to-face with another person. But unfortunately, our world has become somewhat harsh. And I never want this place, our little home here at Mary's Nest, here in my nest, I never want this place to be harsh. I never want any of us to be harsh with one another, never to be critical with one another. I want us to be accepting and loving and kind and meet each other wherever we are on our journey and be understanding and be encouraging and being helpful. Because that is what's going to help us all eventually reach the point where we have this full-blown, fully operating traditional kitchen, traditional foods kitchen, where we're making our bone broth, where we're making our cultured dairy, we're making our ferments, we're making our sourdough starter, we're making our sourdough bread. Maybe we're even soaking and sprouting grain and then drying it and making our own sprouted flour so that we can make sprouted flour bread like what we'll see at the grocery store. So all of these things we do together, we learn little by little, we help one another, and we encourage one another. We don't, what's the expression, like sometimes people say, we don't cut people down. We don't be harsh with them. We don't force them into a situation of saying you must buy X, which only makes them want to leave our little world here. We don't want that to happen. We want everyone to be helping everyone. Now, something I want to share with you on this subject of cooking with economy and grace is that this technically is not a term or an expression that I personally created. It was something that I learned by reading a book that I want to share with you because I've had this book a while. And you probably can find it if you have used bookstores in your area. I've seen it multiple times at Half Price Books. And it's, I think, such an interesting book. And it's called An Everlasting Meal. And the subtitle is Cooking with Economy and Grace. And the foreword was actually written by Alice Waters. She's very popular food cookbook writer. And she is the one who's kind of credited with the sort of farm to table movement, but maybe starting back in the 60s or 70s, not 100% sure. But, she's definitely about, sort of the natural cooking real foods and that type of thing. But the author of this book, and excuse me if I don't pronounce her first name correctly, but I don't know if it's Tamar, and her last name is Adler. And as I said, it's an everlasting meal, cooking with economy and grace. And I highly recommend this book because I'll just, I often like to read to you a little bit about things that are, in the table of contents. But I get a big kick out of chapter 1. She calls it How to Boil Water, and I'll explain in a minute what she's getting at there. But some of the other chapters are how to have balance, how to season a salad, how to live well, how to feel powerful. And these are all things related to being in the kitchen, which is very cute. And in any event, but I love it, how to be tender, how to fry the littlest fish, and as I said, even how to be tender. It does have to do with the kitchen. How to weather a storm. It's just very cute things. But how to boil water, I think is the first chapter. It really sets a lovely tone. And she talks about how she would come home from work and she wouldn't know exactly what she was planning for dinner or whatever the case may be, but she'd just put a pot of water on boil and bring it up to a boil. And then once it came up to a boil, then she would season it with some salt. And then she would take a little taste, like she was tasting a soup or something, to see if the water seemed well seasoned to her. And then she might think about, what could I do with this boiling water? Could I blanch some vegetables and or maybe cook some pasta? And then at the last few minutes before the pasta's ready, maybe throw in some vegetables, and then I could have like a nice pasta primavera that I could make with a little bit of the pasta water and, maybe some butter or olive oil, whatever the case may be. And it's very cute how she talks about this process. And throughout the entire book, it's just she talks about cooking things, being very economical, preparing foods when you come home from the grocery store, and chopping things up and putting them in jars ready to go in your refrigerator. But she really creates a whole mentality throughout this book about how to cook with economy, but at the same time, grace, to be easy on yourself, to not be harsh, and at the same time to save money and to use every little bit of food that's in your kitchen. So I think someone like me who always talks about do not waste. I hate waste, and I just feel, it's like throwing money. Like if you had dollar bills in your hand and you're just throwing them into the garbage. I hate waste, and especially now more than ever with the cost of food rising and rising and rising. We need to be very careful to not waste. So if in your travels you come across this book, I highly recommend it. I think that it's very inspiring, especially during difficult times like we're going through now. I just want to read a short little paragraph to you that is from the introduction to this book, which I think will help give you an indication of what you're going to find in it. And it's a lot of prose, as they say, a lot of writing with recipes distributed throughout. But it's often, that's my favorite kind of cookbook, where the author really writes a lot of information about food. But her introduction is titled How to Begin. And she says, in 1942, M.F.K. Fisher, the famous food writer, wrote a book called How to Cook a Wolf. How to Cook a Wolf is not a cookbook or a memoir or a story about one person or one thing. It is a book about cooking defiantly amid the mess of war and the pains of bare pantries. Because food was rationed, it is about living well in spite of lack, which made a book devoted to food and its preparation, as the New York Times described it, spiritually restorative. Well, there you have it. Cooking with economy and grace. It was spiritually restorative. certainly we're going through difficult times now, but God willing, it won't be as bad as what our parents and grandparents, maybe your great-grandparents, lived through during the Great Depression of the 1930s, as well as the rationing discussed here of World War II. But I think that we can learn so much from what those people wrote about those times, as well as what we can learn from people who are still living, who lived through those times. My mother is 97 years old, and she lived through the Great Depression and the rationing of World War II. And I learned so much from her growing up about how never to waste food. And I think that when you learn those skills, regardless of what level of food you can buy, even if it's just that $5 chicken, when you really start to develop the skills of cooking with economy and grace, regardless of what you're cooking, but making sure that you get everything out of every scrap available to you, you will find that you really have a sense of plenty. I think it's very cute in this book. Tamar talks about Miss Fisher in a little more detail, and she talks about cooking, even during hard times, cooking with gusto. And that is something that you really can do when you start to look at everything you have in a new light. And I discussed this in another video where I talk about how to inflation-proof our pantries. But I think when you look at everything in your kitchen and think, what can I do with this? I don't want to throw this out. What can I make? Can I make a meal? Can I use it to maybe regrow it? You know, as I've shared with you, I've talked about, regrowing kitchen scraps, specifically vegetables. Can I put this in my scrap bag for when I want to make bone broth? Can I pickle these scraps? Can I ferment these scraps? Whatever the case may be, even cooking water that you've cooked vegetables in contains minerals. You can save that as a base to cook your grains in. You can save that as a base to start soups and stews. The water, as I've shared with you in the past, from boiled potatoes or boiled pasta is rich in starch. Let that cool down. Feed your sourdough starter with that water. It's very, as I said, it's very rich in starch, and the yeast will just gobble it up, and you'll get a wonderful bubbling to your starter. So that's what you want to do. You want to start looking at everything that you bring into your pantry, your whole Four Corners pantry, whether it's your working pantry, your fridge, your freezer, or your extended prepper pantry. And you want to look at everything and say, I do not want to waste. I do not want any of this to go into the garbage. What do I need to do? What do I need to learn so that I make use of every single scrap in my kitchen, so that I make use of every penny I've spent on food, regardless of where I've bought that food. I have another video, I talk about multiple streams of food, whether they're things that you've bought at the grocery store or at the farmer's market or that you've raised yourself. All of these multiple streams of food come into your kitchen, provide you with security, and then you, as the steward, in a sense, of your traditional foods kitchen, need to learn how to cook everything with economy and with grace so that nothing is going into that garbage. So I think you will really enjoy this book. It's a wonderful book to uplift you during difficult times, during the times when our grocery budgets are tight. And if you find you like that, Tamar has another book that is also very interesting. It's called Something Old and Something New, and it's classic recipes revised. And really, it's just a lot of lovely fun recipes where you can actually make a lot of these in essence your own. She's basically taking, as she says, very traditional recipes, and she's tweaking them with a little this and that based on things she has in her kitchen. And you can do the same. I often get a kick out of some of the comments I get after I'll make a video and post a video where I'm showing you how to make some recipe and whatnot. But throughout the video, I'm saying, well, don't worry if you don't have this, you can use this. And if you don't have this, you can use this. A lot of substitutions. And sometimes I'll get comments and I just think they're so cute. They say, Mary, why do you even consider it a recipe? You're substituting everything. But again, this comes back to meeting people where they are. I want you to feel comfortable in knowing that nothing I'm going to share with you is set in stone. You know, what does Emeril Lagasse used to say? It's not rocket science, you know, when it comes to cooking. That it is relatively easy to make substitutions for different things in a recipe. And the more you become accomplished at home cooking, the more you're going to realize that. You're going to learn how, if you decide you want to start incorporating whole grains into your breads, that it may require a little more water. But really the recipe can be adjusted very easily. If you don't have eggs, you can use a little applesauce. You know, it's things like that. And so it's really just a matter of learning these skills, and then over time you become more and more comfortable in terms of how to use everything to its maximum. So as you watch my videos, as you review my community posts, always know that we're all here for each other, and that we don't want to be critical of each other regardless of what type of food we're buying. As long as we're preparing it and serving it with love, we're all doing the best we can with what we have. We're cooking with economy and grace, and we're all here to help each other and to show grace to one another. So know that I am here for you, as are most everyone in this group is here for you. So when you have questions, you know, leave them in the comments, and hopefully I'll be able to chime in, or maybe others can chime in, and know that we're all here to help each other. Now, if you'd like more information on how to cook with economy and grace, to cook economical meals, be sure to click on this video over here, where I have a playlist of very budget-friendly meals that are easy to make and easy to make substitutions. And I'll see you over there in my Texas Hill Country Kitchen. Love and God bless.